comes from the book of Acts, starting at chapter 10 and reading verses 34 to 43. Then Peter began to speak. I now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism, but accepts men from every nation who fear him and do what is right. You know the message God sent to the people of Israel, telling the good news of peace through Jesus Christ, who is Lord of all. You know what has happened throughout Judea, beginning in Galilee after the baptism that John preached, how God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit and power, and how he went around doing good and healing all who were under the power of the devil, because God was with him. We are witnesses of everything he did in the country of the Jews and in Jerusalem. They killed him by hanging him on a tree, but God raised him from the dead on the third day and caused him to be seen. He was not seen by all the people, but by witnesses whom God had already chosen, by us who ate and drank with him after he rose from the dead. He commanded us to preach to the people and to testify that he is the one whom God appointed as judge of the living and the dead. All the prophets testify about him, that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name. And the second reading comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 16, verses 1 to 8. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in white robes sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him? But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid.
Thank you for your love that saves us. Jesus, thank you for the cross. With our hearts on fire and our hands raised high.
We have been talking about following in the footsteps of Jesus. And we've taken a really long journey. We began way up at the top by the Sea of Galilee in a town called Capernaum. And we walked with Jesus all the way down to Jerusalem. A long walk. And we've learned lots of things on the way. We wondered, why would Jesus go to Jerusalem, where he knew the people weren't really happy with him, but we saw that really there was a reason, and that was the cross and his love for us. So today we know how that story ends. The tomb is empty. Can you imagine going to a funeral, getting ready to bury a loved one, and you can't find the body? That would be rather upsetting, I think. You know, he's supposed to be there. But the stone is rolled away, and the tomb is empty. When they look in, all they see is the wrappings that were around his body. Now, we know what it means. But think about being there for the very first time, going to try to make sure Jesus is buried properly, and you cannot find him. What would you think? Yeah?
It would be scary.
It would be scary. I'd be scared. Anything else? No? Yeah? Yeah. And here's the message. He is not here, for he has risen. Would that help if you were scared a little bit? Yeah? Would it? I don't know if I know what to do with it. I'm looking for a guy and he's not here because he's risen? Does that make any sense? Now that we know what it means, it makes a whole lot of sense. And this is one of the reasons that we have the Easter lilies, those trumpets, sounding the good news of the cross and the empty tomb. So here, can you tell me what that means? Yeah?
At first there's 3 crosses, then there's empty tomb.
Do you remember why there are 3 crosses, not just one for Jesus? Yeah? There were 2 people very crucified next to Jesus. And sometimes we misunderstand that, but it's very, very powerful that Jesus died with 2 other people, and 2 people who had some problems. And now we have the stone rolled away and the empty tomb. We know that means Jesus isn't there. He's risen. We just saw that. And because we know the story, we know what that means for us. What about that last little picture? What do you think that is? A stone with a little chip in a corner.
All I know I see is a white circle.
A white circle. But you know what? I'm not going to tell you anything more about that today. I'm going to let you think about it for a little while. But it leads to this picture. Can you see what they're spelling out? Hope. And that has something to do with the empty tomb. Just in case you didn't get it, there it is, hope. There's another word that goes with that, faith. Hope and faith make sense out of the fact that Jesus wasn't there. And he wasn't there because he's risen. And that's the good news we celebrate. So that's the story for today. As we did last week, I'm going to ask you, don't run away. Help me sing the next hymn. And after the hymn, if you need to run away, you can. But don't go too far. The hymn in the red book is number 213.
To
the obvious theme for Easter Sunday, and we all know exactly what that means. What it means is something that, as I said to the children, doesn't make much sense. As a fact of history, as a matter of faith, it makes all the sense ever. So what I want to do is just take you through Mark's version of the Easter story and point out just a few things. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint Jesus' body. And you can well imagine these women on the way to the tomb doing what they had to do. Maybe it's not so curious that no men were invited with them to go and do the final preparations of the body, but they went off. And I love this picture because I'm sure there was conversation on the way. For all sorts of reasons, some which I'll leave to your imaginations, but some because they wanted to make sure they were organized and ready for the task at hand, because the body needed to be anointed. And in this little picture, there are three of them, and they have three things that they're carrying that really point us back to the Christmas story and the wise men and the three gifts they brought. That didn't make sense at that time either. But on the way to the tomb, when the Sabbath was over, these women were simply going to do what was right and what was required. And I love that their attention is on each other, because that's where our attention would be. Back in the corner, on either side, you see some of the story unfolding. So very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they went on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, who will roll the stone away from the entrance to the tomb? Very interesting. For three organized women going to do what was required and what was proper, you think they would have thought ahead, saying, how are we going to get in there? Because it would take 2 or 3 men to roll the tomb open. And as they get closer, they realized they had missed one of the things on their checklist. Who is going to roll this stone away? And I'm amazed that they didn't stop and go back. But for some reason, they kept going. A coincidence? I don't think God works with coincidences. I think that God was preparing the way, and perhaps sometime God allows us to forget things that don't matter because He's got it already under control. Yeah, I did say it's all right to forget things sometime, so you can quote me on that in the appropriate place, because God's already got things under control. When they looked up, they saw the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. Now, you're going to the tomb to do what is required for you to do what's right to do. You wonder about the stone being rolled away. You get there and it's rolled away. What would you think? Oh yeah, God's got it all under control. That wouldn't be my first thought. My first thought would have been somebody's been here and been messing about. And I'm not sure what that means. And there must have been a moment of panic. Somebody has stolen the body of Jesus. Why else would the entrance to the tomb be rolled away? And it's a wonder that they even looked in. Long ago and far away, I went into my mom's house and I discovered that there had been a break-in. So I did what you're supposed to do, and I called for the police, and the police said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm standing in the house," and they said, "Don't go into the house, it's been broken into, because you might get into trouble." Going into a tomb where the stone has been rolled away would not be a prudent thing to do. If they didn't turn back to get someone to roll away the stone, this was the occasion to run away. But of course, we know they didn't. And they found something. Well, they entered the tomb, and they saw a young man dressed in white, in a white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Now they're a bit alarmed. God bless these women who had greater something than I have. They find a man sitting there. Now you're going to the tomb to do what's right, what's required by law. You're worried about the stone's rolled away, the tomb's open, you're thinking all these thoughts. You go in and there's some guy sitting there. Yeah, they were alarmed. It didn't make any sense. And yet, they didn't run away. Because again, it's not a series of coincidences, it's God setting things right. And so they enter into a conversation with this strange guy in a white dress. Just think about that for a moment. A guy in a white dress. For us, that's really incredible. Maybe in their day it wasn't so. But when things aren't the way you expect them, and there's an odd character in the way, I don't know. And the words that he said to them, "Don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus, the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He's not here. See the place where they laid him." Well, no doubt they checked for themselves to verify this young man in the white dress's story, and he wasn't there. And I think if I were with them, the focus would be on the fact that he's not there. And I probably would have missed the first words. He was crucified, but he's risen. Hadn't Jesus spoken to them about that? But it didn't really sink in. And it probably didn't make sense because it's not what they would have expected. It's not what they would have been looking for. And then the story gets really, really interesting. "Go," says the young man in the white dress, "and tell his disciples and Peter, he's going ahead of you into Galilee, and there you will see him just as he told you." Quite the message, not for the women, but for the disciples and Peter, the one who had done such a wrong by his Lord and his Master. Now, I'm not sure how I would have reacted to the fact that he wasn't there. I'm told he's risen. Go and tell the other people. And do you know what the women did? According to Mark's Gospel, this is beautiful. Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb, and the women said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Isn't that something? Then I guess the question is, Mark, how did you hear about it? Well, they got over their fear, obviously. But isn't that how we react to this Easter story when it grasps us? We don't know what to say. And if we say what we think is on our minds, everybody's going to say, "You're crazy. That doesn't make any sense. He's risen. He's not there. No, somebody stole him, or you're having a bad dream." The power in the Easter story is it continues what Jesus did and always did. Call people to believe. Not to act in a certain way, but to believe that he brought the love of God to bear on the lives of people who needed something. To live in faith. And by living in faith, by definition, is we don't know necessarily what the next step is going to be or mean. An empty tomb only makes sense in faith. So folks, here it is. He is risen. As he said, he is risen indeed. I'm excited for Easter, for sure. But because I've been planning to end our Easter service with this song for 6 months. We've been teaching it to you for 3 months. I recorded it originally about a year ago. And I've been playing with it ever since because I haven't been able to get it quite right. I think it's there. And I wanted to play the full version for you since Christmas. But we're going to do it today. What a beautiful name. Speak his name.